We've mentioned in previous discussions that the classical Greeks left a tremendous legacy, and they still very much influence the way we live, the way we see the world. Scientific thinking, the idea of literature as an intentional art form, drama, written history as we think of it, the concept of humanism, sort of formal logic, systematic philosophy, political theory, democracy, etc. All of these things, in all of these things we find the influence of the classical Greeks. And this is also true of the language we speak. If you look at the graph on the right, it says that about 6% of the words in English come from Greek. A minute ago or a few seconds ago I used the word graph. The word graph comes from Greek. The item on the right lists some of the many words in English that can be traced back to Greek. We're going to look at some Greek words and we're going to see how they exist in English. The Greek words I'm going to show you are written only in lowercase letters, so we're not looking at capital letters but only at lowercase letters, and we're not going to go through the Greek alphabet in detail, although the one thing I do want to point out now is that the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha and beta, that's where our word alphabet comes from. Here's a word where we have lambda, we have omicron, we have gamma, we have another omicron, and then we have a sigma. And in the scheme on the left, the sigma there, you see it's like a circle with a hat sort of thing going to the right. That's if the letter S appears within a word. If it appears at the end of the word, which is the case in the words we're going to look at here, then the sigma looks like that. So for our purposes, this word is L-O-G-O-S, logos. And the equivalent, that is, if you look the word up in the dictionary, what will it give as an English equivalent? And of all the words we're going to look at now, this one is the most complicated. It means a number of things. It can mean word, reason, speech, logic, and other things. So by equivalent, we mean you look the word up in a dictionary. So you have logos in the Greek. What does it say in English is the equivalent? And then a derivative, that's a word that's an English word that is derived from the Greek word. So let's see. So for example, our word logic then is related to logos, and you see that logic is one of the equivalents, so that makes some sense. Logistics, moving things around, that's related to this word. And then our logy words are words that end with L-O-G-Y, and so we'll see examples of that. So for example, here's anthropos, and so we have alpha, nu, theta, rho, omicron, P or pi, omicron, sigma, and this word is anthropos. Anthropos. And anthropos, the equivalent means man or person. Okay, so we have anthropos, the equivalent man, person. Derivative would be anthropoid, for example. So an anthropoid, an example would be a turtle in a cartoon that is acting like a person. Right, or a horse in a cartoon that's acting like a person, something like that. Okay, philanthropic. There's a Greek verb phileo, which is one Greek verb for to love, and so phileo, and then anthropos, philanthropic. That is literally a lover of people, and a philanthropic person is a person who is generous, who gives to others. Okay. Well, anthropos, meaning man or person, plus logos gives us anthropology. So there's an example. Our logy words are related to or come from logos. Here's another word, chronos. Chronos, which means time. So we have the chi, the rho, the omicron, the nu, the omicron, and the sigma. Chronos, and the equivalent is time. So chronos, the equivalent, you look it up in the dictionary, the equivalent is time. The derivative, for example, would be chronic, an English word that comes from that Greek word. We put chronos and logos together, and what do we get? You can probably guess. We get chronology. Okay? So already we've seen a number of words that we hear all the time that come to us from Greek. Here is psuche. Psuche, the first letter, psi, and then we have the upsilon, and then we have the chi, and then we have the eta. So that first word is psyche. That second word with the gamma and the eta, that's ge. Okay, so psyche and ge. Psyche, the equivalent is mind. Ge, the equivalent is earth. Let's look at the derivatives. Psyche, psyche. So we use that word psyche, which is pretty much just like the Greek word. And then the related words, psychiatry. Ge means earth. A derivative would be geometry, for example, and the MET part having to do with measurement also comes from Greek. Geometry literally meaning the measurement of the earth, so that geo part there is related to ge. Let's see what happens. Let's put psyche and logos together. What do we get? If we put ge and logos together, what do we get? We get psychology and geology. These are pretty common words that come to us from Greek. Here's another word, bios. And bios means life. So beta, iota, omicron, sigma. Bios means life. And it means life in particular. And I point that out because there's another word for life that's coming up. So bios means life. Cardia, so there we have the kappa, the alpha, the rho, the delta, the iota, and the alpha. Cardia, that means heart. Okay, so we have bios, the equivalent, life. Derivative, biometrics, having to do with the measurement of life, literally. Biology, there's bios plus logos put together. Cardia means heart. Derivative, cardiovascular. We can talk about cardiovascular health. That has to do with your heart. Cardiology, there's cardia plus logos put together, the study of the heart, or things pertaining to the heart, cardiology. Here we have another word for life, zoe, zoe. So we have the zeta, the omega, and the eta. Zoe, and omega that's another version of the letter in English, O. So zoe means life, and life in general. And then that next word, aster. So there's alpha, there's sigma, so the S inside of a word. So alpha, sigma, tau, eta, rho. Aster. Zoe means life. The equivalent is life. Derivatives would be zoo. Protozoa, so protozoa, those one-celled creatures, right? So the idea being first life, because the Greek word protos means first, so the idea of kind of the most basic life. Protozoa. Zoology, there's zoe plus logos put together. Aster means star, and our word star actually is quite close to that. Just take the alpha off and you have stare, star. So obviously our word star is pretty directly related to the Greek word aster. Other derivatives would be asteroid and astrology. Okay, so you put aster and logos together, and then you get astrology. Here's a new word, nomos. So we have nu, omicron, mu, omicron, sigma. Okay, and so it means law. It means law. So a derivative would be, for example, autonomy. Now I have it up in the right there. Autos is another Greek word meaning self, right? So autonomy meaning, its synonym in English would be free. So an autonomous person is a free person, an independent person. You might study in school what's called the autonomic nervous system, right? The autonomic nervous system in the body. So for example, those functions in our bodies that just operate without our thinking about it, for example, the beating of the cardia, the heart beats. We don't have to remind ourselves, we don't have to remind our heart to beat. Our heart just beats. That's part of the autonomic nervous system, okay? And so autos meaning self. So for example, automobile means something that is mobile by itself. It doesn't need horses to pull it. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Aster plus nomos. Remember, aster means star. Nomos means law. astronomy. Okay, so here we have phone, first letter phi, then omega, nu, eta, phone. And phone means voice or sound. The next word is telos, tau, epsilon, lambda, omicron, sigma. So let's see what happens here. Equivalent, as we've said, phone, voice, sound, telos, equivalent, end, goal, finishing point of something. So a derivative of phone, for example, would be phonetics, learning to read based on the sounds of a language. Phone. So obviously you speak into the phone makes sound, so there's an English word clearly derived from phone. Telos, derivative, telephone. So that's an interesting thing. We put telos and phone together, and the conception is the phone is the thing that we associate with someone else's voice. It's also the thing into which someone else's voice terminates. Okay, so let's look at this. Telos then, as we said, the equivalent, end, goal, finishing point of something. Derivative, telephone, telegraph. Telegraph, the tele part comes from telos. The graph, that comes from the next word down, graphe, graphe. And the equivalent of the word graphe in English is writing. So telos gives us the tele part, graphe gives us the graph part, so telegraph from those two words. Also graphite, used for writing. And then the word graph comes from graphe. So there's graphe again, writing, derivative, telegraph, graphite, graph. And then we have the word biblos, right? So beta, iota, beta, lambda, omicron, sigma. And the equivalent is book. Biblos, Bible. So you can see the similarity there, right? First four letters are the same. And so our word Bible comes from biblos. But what if you put biblos and graphe together? Then you get bibliography, right? So all of these are very common words that we use a lot. Maybe not graphite so much, and I guess we don't hear about the telegraph very much. But most of these are words that we hear quite a bit. Let's look at some other words. Ethnos, and the equivalent means people group or nation. Podos means foot. Diabolos means devil. Angelos means messenger. Okay, let's see what happens. So ethnos, the equivalent, people group, nation. Derivative, ethnic, ethnicity, pretty clear. Podos, the equivalent is foot. English word derived from it. Well, if your foot's hurting, you can go see the podiatrist. The thing you put your foot on your bicycle, in your car. The pedal, so we've changed the vowel there, but the PED relates back to podos. A pedestrian, somebody getting around on his or her feet. So also related to podos. Diabolos, the equivalent is devil, and you can see a similarity there. So I think a derivative is also devil, although a much clearer derivative is diabolical. Right? And then, of course, in Spanish, the devil is el diablo, right? Diablo, or French diable. Okay? So, derivative then, a clear derivative there is diabolical. Angelos means messenger. Derivative is angel. Here we have nomos. Remember, we've seen nomos already. It means law. And an example of a derivative would be autonomy, autos, self, nomos, law. So the idea of an autonomous person is a person who is a law to him or herself, a free, independent person. Let's look at three other words. Oikos. Oikos means home. Macros means big. Mikros means small. Let's see what happens here. What happens if we put oikos, home, and nomos together? Then we have, literally the idea is the law of the home or home management. And that is the origin of our word economics. So that eco part is related to the oikos, the nomics part clearly related to nomos. So our word economics comes from these two Greek words put together, which themselves literally have to do with the management of the home. Now what if we put macros in front of oikos and nomos? Macros means big, right? So macros plus oikos plus nomos gives us macroeconomics. If you study macroeconomics, then you study sort of big picture economics. You study trade between nations. You study the economy of the United States. Big picture economics. Mikros means small. So mikros plus oikos plus nomos, then we have microeconomics. And microeconomics might be the study of a particular business, the study of sort of individual economic decisions. So small picture economics. So as we've seen here, and we've just gotten just a very tiny look into it, as we've seen, there's a lot of Greek in English, and we're using Greek words all the time. As you look at that graph, and remember that the word graph comes from Greek, as you look at this graph, you see that we're speaking much more Latin. We're speaking Latin all the time. And English is a Germanic language. You know, what's interesting is English is a Germanic language, but there's actually more Latin in English than Germanic. According to this graph, there's also more French in this, in English than Germanic. So this is curious. English is a Germanic language, but it's got all of this French and all of this Latin. And of course, French itself is a dialect of Latin. And so really the influence on English of Latin is tremendous. So compared to Latin, compared to French, compared to Germanic languages, the influence of Greek is pretty small, but as we've seen, we're using Greek words all the time. And so Aristotle can quite rightly tell us that we have a lot more in common with him and his world than we think. Not only the influence of the classical Greeks on us in terms of what we call the scientific method, in terms of thinking about, detailed thinking about politics, etc., but also in our everyday language, we are using Greek words all the time.